Check, check. Check, check. 1, 2.
Did you have a tournament this weekend?
Get out of here. No.
All right, everybody. Let's move on into our chairs, please. We get started now. Oh. Hat's going backwards. We're getting serious. Okay, well, welcome in, everybody. Let's find our seats. We're sitting down good. All right, we're filing. Ooh. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to AUG. We have a more standard feeling session tonight, which will be fun for us. So pretty much notes the entire time. And because of that, I look to be able to give you guys like a 10-minute break. So you have that to look forward to. I have my own snack. I'm prepared. And I have a cup that I brought so I can drink water. So there we go. Open up to your syllabus, please. We're on the second page, and you'll notice that we are getting really close to the end here. So nothing written in that far right column for tonight, because as I said, we're just standard session tonight. We're going to be going through our doctrine for the night, angels and demons. And next time, we kind of begin those final few sessions as we're working towards the final. So next session, we do have a study session. We'll also do final exam review, and the quiz on angels and demons, and all 2025 quizzes are due. So if you're missing one or two, now's your chance to take those. The advice for those, unless you've talked to Heather, myself, or Kathy, waiting doesn't help you a ton. At some point, you should just take it. And like half credit is way better on your score than 0. Just so you know. So pay attention to that. And then the final on 5-4. So Heather will talk a little bit more about that next session, but you got to be there. If you don't take the final for some reason, you will fail AUG because it's worth that many points. So that's how it goes. We ask you to prioritize that session. If there's like a dance competition where you have to miss, there is a workaround for that. But if you don't do either of those, you don't take it, you will fail because it's usually ends up being around 40% of your grade more sometimes. So, but you should know everything that's on there because you have your quizzes back from us, or you're getting them back. We have some more we can hand out tonight back with Anita. You can check your grade as well. Anita will do that with you. Kathy printed out the sheet, so you can do that. So we have all of that for you to know where you're at. If you've been showing up, doing the quizzes, doing everything, you're in a good spot. So it shouldn't cause you extra anxiety. The one thing that you might want to start a little early, though, for the final is your books of the Bible. Make sure you got all of them on lock, and your memory verses. So you'll want to make sure you have all those, because that ends up being, like over 200 points on the final. It's just that, and that can really help push that final in the right direction when you choose to do those and have them well. Even if you mess up a little bit here or there on your verses, you still get 90, 95%. That's an awesome score on that section, and will really help out to cushion for the rest of it. So that's the one thing I suggest you start now, because memory work tends to not work well if you try to cram it the day of. There are certainly some random essay things and things that we can tweak the day of during the study session, but that memory work, you're going to want to do that and start that a little in advance, is my recommendation for you. So, and then the invitation for the AUG graduation will come in the mail, and that is for yourself as well as parents and grandparents who like to come, and you guys all dress up and you get to walk across the stage and you get to receive a diploma from Heather, and you have to learn to shake with the right and receive the diploma with the left hand. We're just preparing you for high school graduation, so don't worry, you'll have your prep in, so that for me, when I walked in front of 675 students and then all their families, I wasn't worried about the whole thing, and I didn't mess it up, because I would have felt embarrassed, even though it's really not that big of a deal. So, but we're prepping you for that. So there you go. Turn in your manuals to tab 8. Nope, tab 9. Tab 9. Wow, we almost started off on the wrong foot. Whew, close. That was close. So turn to tab 9. Okay, Doctrine of Angels and Demons. I want to start by seeing where we're at, get the temperature of the room when it comes to this topic. So at your tables, just do a little bit of a knowledge vomit. What do you know or have you heard, even if it's just from culture or for friends or from other movies? What do you know or have you heard about angels and demons or spiritual beings? I want to see where we're at. Just do a little discussion at your tables right now. Go ahead. All right, this is a chance. Hey, some of you have plenty of participation points at this point in the year. Some of you still could use some more, and you're looking to pass AUG, I know. So this is a great chance, because this is one of those things. I just asked, have you heard? What do you know? It doesn't necessarily have to be correct. So especially if you're looking for some extra participation points at this point in the year, I would love to see some of you. Okay. Isaac, I'm sure you have enough. I love you, and I'm sure you have enough. Thank you, sir. All right, Ellis and Sophie, let's go in the back. We have a mic runner for the night. Eve, will you abuse that power? Oh, Greg's on it. Yeah, Greg. So Sophie and Ellis to start, Greg. Sophie and Ellis over here. Make sure to say your name for those participation points, though, first and last.
My name is Sophie, and I go to Eden Prairie, and Satan is a fallen angel.
Satan is a fallen angel. Nice. Okay.
My name is Ellis. I go to Edina High School. Angels are normally good and demons are normally bad.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, what else do we talk about at our table? I'll look over here. Addison, I really feel like you have enough participation points, but since you're so eager, yes, you. And then Tyler.
Where are we going?
Tyler and Addison.
Hi, I'm Tyler Osters. I go to Eden Prairie High School, and more of a third of the angels left with Lucifer.
More than a third of the angels left with Lucifer. Nice. Okay.
I'm Addison Martin. I go to St. Louis Park High School, and they can possess people.
Demons can possess people. Okay. What else have we heard? Is there anything that, like, you've heard from culture, movies, TV shows that's going around? Okay. Miles, you got something? Wait. Gotta wait for the mic, sir, because we want to all be able to hear you.
I'm Miles. I go to Edina High School, and demons still can cause an apocalypse on Earth.
Oh, okay. Demons can still cause an apocalypse on Earth. Interesting. All right. Something that hasn't been said. All right, Kendall? And then we'll go to you, Annika, right?
I'm Kendall, and I go to Edina. When demons take over somebody's body, there has to be an exorcism happening to the person to get the demon out of them.
Okay. There's an exorcism that has to kick them out. I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong yet. I just want to hear what you guys have heard, so.
My name is Annika Dirksen, and I go to Chaska High School, and my dad has told me that aliens are demons.
Oh, aliens and demons. Instead of aliens, they're actually demons. Okay, there you go. Interesting. All right. Jillian, you'll have a chance later. We'll have plenty of time. Okay. So, the doctrine of angels, demons, and Satan. This is one of those doctrines that for a lot of us, things can get kind of weird and goofy, right? Because our frame of thinking about the world is not one which often has space for spiritual beings. What is technically his title? I can't remember what he was. He was a professor, he taught at, I think, Stanford. But his name is Charles Taylor, and he basically wrote the textbook on what secularism is. So here in the West, in our culture, we're a very secular culture, we're kind of post-Christian, and we value reason and the ability to think and solve our way through things very highly. Immanuel Kant's very famous for saying that we are brains on a stick, which is not true, that's not the biblical vision, but that's what kind of our understanding is. Charles Taylor has this phrase about our culture that we live in something called the immanent frame. The immanent frame is kind of a fancy way of saying that we see the world and we understand the only things that are real is what we can see and what can be written on a data sheet or plotted on a graph. So there isn't any room for spiritual things, right? Not religion, not for angels, for demons. That's kind of the world we live in. Is we live in a world where there isn't really room for that kind of thing. Because immanent frame, it's only what's in front of me, right? It's only these people here. It's only the numbers that appear on my spreadsheet, that the plot points that come from my lab working. That's the only thing that can be real. The difference is the Bible does not have that same frame of mind. Not only that, not the church doesn't, most of the world doesn't, and certainly most of history has not thought that way. We actually live in a minority space where we think or live in a culture that thinks in that kind of way. And this is one of those doctrines that challenges our way of thinking and looking at the world and saying, actually, there's something else going on out there. There are other things that are real and exist that are beyond our understanding and what we can see. Turn to Psalm 82. A few years back, someone called Michael Heiser did a bunch of interesting work looking at different spiritual beings in the Bible, specifically in the Hebrew Scriptures. And Psalm 82 verse 1 was one of those things that kind of stuck out to him, and he thought, that's interesting. I don't know that I've ever read it that way. So let me read to you what this says. I'm looking at 83. That's not going to help. All right. So Psalm 82:1, God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. Did you catch that? So God, singular, capital, presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. My NIV has it in quotation marks. So God is rendering judgment over other gods. In our mind, many of us are Christians, we take it for granted that God is there, right? He's a being who's real, he's out there. But yet this idea that he's also rendering judgment over other gods, as the translation goes here. That's something that's really interesting and unique. And Michael Heiser pointed out, this was one of the verses that kind of helped highlight this idea to him, that the Bible sees things a little differently than a lot of us do. That there are other spiritual beings, there are other things that are going out around in the world that we need to pay attention to and we need to notice. And the Bible takes this kind of way of thinking, that there are other spiritual forces and beings and creatures out there, for granted, and just understands that's how it is. And we're going to spend some time looking at that tonight. Because it's such a helpful little intro, before we get into demons, because we like to start off strong with the bad, I found a Bible Project video that Michael Heiser actually helped co-write the script for, which is interesting, so that's cool. But this one's really good intro of spiritual beings. It helps kind of open our imagination to this kind of way of looking at the world, because, again, for so many of us, it's different than the culture we swim in, or maybe even some of our own presuppositions. So, Chad, you can play that video.
If you pick up the Bible, you don't have to read far before you meet the main character, God.
Yeah, he appears in the Bible's first sentence. And then later on page 1, you meet the humans.
And there you have it. The two main players in the Bible, God and humans on the stage of our world.
Well, not quite. In the Bible, there's actually a way bigger cast of characters than just humans and God.
Like who?
I mean the figures called the Elohim in the Hebrew Scriptures. Angels, the Satan, demons, they're all over the story.
Oh, right. Spiritual beings. To be honest, I've never really known what to do with them. It's all kind of weird.
And unfortunately, almost all of our modern conceptions about these beings are based on serious misunderstandings.
All right, so let's talk about spiritual beings in the story of the Bible.
So first thing we have to do is reorient ourselves to how the ancient biblical authors saw the world. On pages 1 and 2 of Genesis, God brings order to a watery wilderness, separating the skies above from the land below.
Right, this is Earth, where we live. And then there's the heavens high above, which they saw as God's domain.
But in the Bible, these spaces are not separate. They overlap. And in fact, the Garden of Eden is described throughout the Bible as a high mountain garden where heaven and earth are one.
Cool.
So that's the world. Now it needs some creatures. God first creates and appoints the sun, moon, and stars to rule the day and night.
You mean the giant flaming gas balls in the sky?
Well, that's how you think about them. But the biblical authors, like all ancient people, saw them as heavenly creatures that are glorious, shining bright, and high above.
Which is strange. I don't think of stars as creatures.
Well, you don't. But for the biblical authors, the stars formed their categories for thinking and talking about a spiritual reality that exists alongside ours. And it's a different kind of reality, just like the sky is different from the land. And it's populated with creatures that have different kinds of bodies, shiny spiritual bodies.
Okay, so almost all ancient cultures thought of the stars as divine beings, including the ancient Israelites.
But the biblical authors make clear that these beings are not God. Rather, they're images of God. Their glory and high status is a reflection of the Creator's glory and status, and they exist to serve His purposes.
So the stars symbolize beings who are like God's heavenly staff team.
Right. Now let's go back, because after God appointed the heavenly host, He also appointed another type of creature.
The humans.
Yeah, in Hebrew they're called Adam, which sounds like the Hebrew word for dirt, because that's what they're made of.
So, glorious rulers above and hairy sapiens below.
But then comes the great twist. God tells the lowly humans that they are to rule all of creation. He invites them to rise above their dirty origins and share in God's glory as his partners.
So God wants to rule the world through humans and not the spiritual beings.
Exactly. This is how the poet of Psalm 8 understood the stories of Genesis. He looked up at the stars and says,
"What is humanity that you consider him? You made him lower than the spiritual beings, but crowned him with glory and divine majesty."
This is humanity's high calling, to rule creation in the love and power of God.
Very cool.
But not everyone's happy. We're introduced to a spiritual being who doesn't want humans to rule, so he tricks them into thinking that they can get divine power on their own terms.
They're deceived, and they take the opportunity.
So they're banished from the Eden mountain, exiled to wander the earth and return to the dust.
This snake is bad news.
Yeah, and as you read on, you discover that he's part of a spiritual rebellion that follows the humans outside of Eden, and things get worse from here.
The humans still desire to rule, so they start a new project.
Yes, in the Bible, this is called Babylon. It's the anti-Eden, where human and spiritual rebels join together to elevate themselves back to their former glory. And so, with all that in mind, we can now appreciate the full cast of characters that we meet in the biblical story.
God, humans, and all of the spiritual beings.
Exactly. And so here's a preview of what we're going to explore. We'll learn more about God's heavenly staff team called the Divine Council. Then we'll talk about angels and cherubim, key figures in the spiritual realm, and then one particular angel called the Angel of the Lord. We'll also look at the spiritual rebels in the Bible, connected with the Satan and demons. And finally, we'll see how this whole story leads to Jesus, the one who overcomes evil, reunites heaven and earth, so that a new humanity can partner with God.
Awesome. Okay. So, if we have time at the end, we'll watch the new humanity video because that one's cool. But we'll see about getting there. First, we got some notes to take care of for the test. The Springlets people are getting here, so just choose to ignore them. And we'll be all good. So, demons. What demons are. So they are good angels turned bad. So like humans, right, like us in the garden, we have a free will. We have the ability to choose for ourselves, okay? In the garden, what the serpent presents Adam and Eve with is, hey, you can choose for yourselves which way, what is good and evil, right? You can choose for yourself. It's the chance for them to be God in that way and make a choice, right? And demons or angels, it turns out, have the same opportunity themselves. So good angels turn bad. So they have chosen to follow Lucifer, to try to make a right way for their own selves, to achieve glory in this kind of way. Let's turn to Isaiah 14:12. I like that one. Lots of Bible today and lots of turning. Thankfully, you've already all done your Old Testament books, so you should be rock solid here. Isaiah 14:12. Okay. Cool. I'll read it for us. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. Awesome. So remember in that video, right, there's a spiritual rebellion, and they're thrown down. And remember the Bible's authors, the way of thinking about the world is that the stars and the sun and the moon, they represent, again, a spiritual reality that is true and exists at the same time as our reality here that is, physical and intangible for us, right? And the way that it's choosing to talk about this reality is saying that, hey, you were once up there, but you got thrown down because of your rebellion. And that is what is true of demons. So what do? With Satan as their leader, they strive to defeat God's will. And we're certainly going to turn to Matthew 13:39 for this one, because it's just too much to not. Okay. So this is one of those times where Jesus' way, the Bible's way of looking at reality is very different than our own, right? So what we see here is Jesus describing that reality and what is going on kind of behind the scenes of something else that is happening. So would someone please read this, and let's go 36 through 39. You can get participation for this. All right, Molly, I saw you first. We'll get the context this way, and then 39 is what we're paying attention for what demons do.
Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels."
Awesome. Thank you. So again, we see a whole host of things that are going on behind the scene. So Jesus even says, hey, explain the parable of the sower and the seeds, right? So they're casting out seeds. Different seed is growing. Some of it grows for a little bit. Some of it is snatched away by someone, right? And they're like, hey, explain that to us. And the way he explains it is by talking about these different categories of spiritual beings and things that are going on behind the scenes that help us understand the spiritual and the warfare aspect to what is going on, to what to us sometimes seems just like, decisions and people doing what people do and some things not happening. Jesus adds and will continue to add throughout his ministry layers to this kind of understanding. So, demon activity. So they can possess a man's being or oppress him physically or spiritually. However, the demons cannot possess a Christian's being through that's not making sense to me. Okay, however, the demons cannot possess a Christian's being, though they can, I was reading through, dyslexia, okay, though they can and do tempt Christians to disobedience. There we go, it does make sense, we're good. So possess and oppress are kind of our two main categories here. We talked about the doctrine of the Holy Spirit. In that, we talked about how when you are a follower of Jesus, the Spirit comes inside of you and dwells in you, right? Paul's very clear about this understanding. Jesus himself says, hey, I will send the Spirit to you, right? So, when you have the literal God of the universe who is inside you, who's dwelling within you, demons, lesser powers, have no chance to possess you. But they still could oppress you in this kind of way. There are a couple categories specifically to talk about what demons do and demon activities. So possess is to occupy, to dominate, or control a person from within. Very common that we see this in the gospel accounts and in times that Jesus encounters different demoniacs or people who are being possessed by demons. This is kind of, we'll talk about this later, one of Jesus' highest showings of power and his authority over the spiritual realm is the fact that he can reverse this kind of affliction. We'll talk about that later, but this is key. Oppress is to burden, weigh down, oppose authority on externally. And for this, there is times when, for strategic reasons, like when people are going on mission trips or preaching or when different things are going on, where demons will choose to oppress, especially believers or other people, to prevent the spread of the gospel, to prevent Christ from being known, and we'll do this in all sorts of weird and fancy ways. Kathy isn't here tonight, but she works in our worldwide department, and you hear all kinds of stories of weird things happening. In fact, Heather just got back from Spring Blitz, and I remember a few seasons ago, Heather was speaking on stage. It might have been when you were class. No, it wasn't. I think it was a class older than you. And I remember we were driving out to lunch, and she said, I feel terrible. I think I'm going to throw up. And Heather is one who hasn't thrown up in 20 years or whatever it was since that point. And it was super weird. And so we're trying to be well, she's the only one who can drive the bus. I'm kind of sitting there being I don't really know what we're going to do. So I prayed for her. She ended up throwing up. It is this weird thing. And both of us have to imagine that it was some sort of oppression, something that was going on that was causing that to happen, because she says when she was on stage, she knew the Spirit was with her. She knew those people were locked in. There was 500 people that she had the chance to talk to about Jesus and his, the way of doing relationships in his life. And yet for her, all of a sudden after, to throw up and have this thing, it's not an anxious or anxiety, it's not like an anxiety reaction from her, because she does that kind of thing all the time. But for all of a sudden that to happen, she hadn't eaten anything abnormal, right? So that's just a little story of something that can kind of happen too. Not kind of, that can happen too. And then the last is obsess, is to pull focus away from God. Oh, and then your little, is that A, B, C thing? Is that a fill in the notes blank for you at the bottom? Okay, good. No? If it's not, write it to the side. And then we'll talk a little bit about obsess. I saw Craig on Friday, and he says he shouldn't be using that video anymore. Not because it's not true, just because it's dated. I think it's his opinion. I said he's suspicious. Why would he sleep with it? Okay. Last O word, obsess. Many of you were at snow camp this year, and Runks in the last session has a really powerful image that he gave you, the clock. Who remembers the clock image that Runks gave you at snow camp? Any of you guys? Who remembers that? Annika, you got it? Can you explain it to us? Oh, whoa. We need the microphone. Because there you go. You want the participation points, right? Yeah.
My name is Annika Dirksen, and I go to Chaska High School. And so a clock has I don't know what they're called, but yeah, hands. And the devil likes to tempt you, like just eat one more piece of cake or something. He just keeps doing that and doing that and doing that until you eat the whole thing.
So we're talking about a clock that has hands on it, so not like the digital one, right? So you guys all know the little circles, they hang on the wall. And they have hands, right? Represent an hour. They got minutes and hour on there. And what the devil will do, right, is will kind of distract you by doing like just a minute off, right? Because when your clock's a minute off, it's like a little annoying, but like you'll figure it out, right? I'm one of the weird people every year when we have daylight savings, and my car clock's like is an hour off, and I don't change it because it just like feels like every time I get in there, I start driving, okay, and I don't want to be changing it, right? And then usually I look at it, and sometimes I look at it and I'm like, oh no, and then like, oh wait, no, it's fine. And then it changes 6 months later, and we're fine, we're back to normal, right? However, if all your clocks were like that, if you understood time that way, you could get really off, because many meetings will only last an hour, and if you're an hour late, you'll miss it. Right? If you're a minute off, you'll be okay. But then he'll move you 2 minutes, right? Now you're 3 minutes off. And he'll kind of do that. He'll slowly move you away and distract you. It's that same kind of idea with obsess. It's pulling focus away from God. And it's often done ever so incrementally. It's done just a little bit at a time, right? Why don't you draw that clock there? Wink, wink. Why don't you draw that clock there? Talk about obsess. It's pulling our focus away from God and how it's done incrementally. Or if you know how to spell incrementally for some reason, because that sounds kind of like a tough word. Obsess is obviously the most subtle of the ways that the enemy that demons can work, right? If everything was possession and really clear oppression, it'd be really easy to know what's going on and at least like develop a plan of attack and fight it, right? But often what people will say about this is, in our kind of Western culture, the biggest, deception the devil ever pulled was by convincing people he wasn't real. Because how can you fight an enemy if you don't think they're real? Have you ever talked to someone who's struggling with something and they won't acknowledge they're struggling? They're never going to get anywhere in that battle. And it's a little bit of the same thing. If people around us don't believe the enemy is real, that there are things going on out there, how are we ever going to fight back and push back, right? If we're never going to acknowledge that there's something else going on there. And it's done ever so incrementally, just a little, minute at a time. I would love for you to do a little discussion at your table and then write these down. What are some ways that the enemy likes to distract 15-year-olds? Something about people your age. How does the enemy like to distract or obsess, pull focus away from God? What are some of the tricks and ploys that he often uses? Make sure you're writing these down. You should have at least 5 at your table because most of you have 4 people. All right, let's hear some of these. Greg, deploy. Greg's always ready to get his steps in. All right, I'm going to call on a couple of you. If I call on you, please stand because Greg doesn't, it's harder for him to track. Eve, Ashley, Jillian, Lydia, and anyone I haven't heard, Marin, I haven't heard from you yet tonight.
Hi, I'm Eve. I go to Eden Prairie High School, and we talked about social media and how it brings us away from God, and we
Just be a distraction, right? It can just be a distraction. If you don't have that one down for some reason, you should write that one down.
Hello, I'm Ashley Zhang. I go to Minnetonka High School, and our group we talked about drugs, which is a problem.
Drugs, different kinds of substances. Yep.
I'm Jillian Tryon. I go to Chaska High School, and relationships.
Yep.
These are all girls.
I'm Erin Lunke, and I go to Minnetonka High School, and we said your social life and status.
Social life and status, yeah.
I'm Lydia Beaver. I go to Ignite Christian Academy, and we said your thoughts, how you think about yourself and others.
Yeah, those can spiral out of control. They can go wrong direction. Gentlemen, represent. Come on, guys, what's going on? Any of you got something to add? Anyone I haven't heard from yet? Otherwise, I will give it to Tyler. All right. Oh, Emmett Coddington in the back. All right.
Oh,
you're okay, Tyler. You're okay.
I'm Emmett Coddington. I go to Southwest Christian. And we said sports and just idolizing the things that you're good at.
Yep. Ty, do you have something new you'd like to add? Yeah, he would. Okay.
I'm Tyler Osters, and we said school.
School. Yeah, of course. Natural. All right, anything new that needs to be added? Ashley, Tally? Ashley, Tally has one.
We mentioned how music and how it can either like push or pull
Yeah.
you away from God.
Yep. That's in Craig's video, part of my story as well. That's good. Okay. So we have several of those down. You should have been writing those down. And of course, the note that we always make, you've probably heard Heather say this before, you've probably heard me say this before, is not all those things are bad things. Many of them are actually good. And that's a really important thing for you to note and remember, is that relationships are an amazing thing. We want you to have healthy relationships, right? Sports might be your thing. I want you to do well in sports, right? I want to be a better climber. I want to do better in my athletics, right? I want to do well in school. School is a good thing to do well at, right? We want you guys to graduate from high school, and many of you will go off and go to college, maybe some master's degrees and PhDs in the room, who knows, right? We want you to do well those things, and the truth is they can also distract us, and they can pull us away from what is most important, right? Think of like Matthew chapter 6, right? Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you, right? Jesus is clear for us as followers of Jesus, we're to first seek the kingdom of God. And anything that pulls our focus away from that in an unhealthy way can be a distraction and can be used to pull us away from Jesus. We need to be really aware of that in our own lives as we think about these things. Next, the most specific of the evil angelic beings, Satan. It's a fallen angel called Lucifer. Because it makes me happy, and I'm a Bible nerd, I want you to write in your margin that in Hebrew, Satan is always called the Satan because it's actually a title, and it means the adversary or the accuser. And that kind of points to the role that he likely has, right, in relation to us and God as the adversary or the accuser. Our kind of biggest and most formal introduction to him earliest on is in Job chapter 1. So let's turn there so we can meet the main player. Yes? Satan is a real being. Yeah, good point. That's interesting. Satan is a real being, which is what we're talking about Job. This is also true. This is point 2. Thank you for that catch, Julie. Job is kind of a big book. 4 Psalms. There we go. Let's see here. Asher, are you willing to read this for participation points section? I'm going to have you read, give me a second here, 6 through 8. Job 1, 6 through 8.
My name is Asher, and I go to Minnetonka High School. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan, who also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil."
So, first of all, pretty sweet that Job got a shout out from God. I mean, that's kind of sick. So, also, if you look at in verse 6, there's a little B in my Bible, probably a little note, by Satan. If you look down to your footnotes at the bottom, it says Hebrew Satan means adversary, which is what I just told you all. So, there you go. Make sure to read your footnotes as a little side note for you. They can be really helpful. So Satan is a real being, and he's kind of the personified and named person of evil in the Bible that we meet, and kind of the main person that we see have interactions with other people later. This happens as well in Matthew 4, where we see Jesus encounter this figure in kind of this climactic way. I'll turn there for you, and I'll read it. Well, actually, all of you turn there, but I will read this section. Matthew 4. So in Matthew's gospel, this is kind of the first moment where we see Jesus taking a stand and fighting against these evil forces. And of course, if it's the main bad guy we're talking about, Jesus, the main character of the Gospels, it's going to be a big deal when they first meet. And that's what we see here. I'll just read for us the first couple of verses. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." So this is kind of that climactic moment where Jesus is going to be tempted. If we think of our story earlier in the Bible, the Jewish people were also tempted. Adam and Eve were tempted. But this time we're going to have a new person, a new Adam, who is not going to fall prey to the devil's temptation. And this is going to become that key moment for that. All right, what Satan is not. He is not omnipotent. So, unlike God, who speaks and the entire universe and existence and spiritual beings all just happen, right? Like us, the devil does not have the power to speak something and have it happen, right? I can tell my dog to sit, and she may or may not choose to sit. It's not automatic when I say it. It's the same thing for the devil. He can't just think something or will something and it automatically happens. In the story with Job, God actually has to give Satan permission to harm him and do anything against him, which is another interesting interaction. So his power is limited. He's not all-powerful. He doesn't have that kind of control over universe and reality. All right, he is not omniscient. These terms should hopefully feel very familiar from earlier in your AUG time together. He is not omniscient, so all-knowing, right? If he were, he would have known in advance the futility of his scheme to subvert Job, and he would surely have realized that it was useless for him to tempt the Lord in the wilderness. So I just read from that Matthew section a little bit. We also talked about what happened in Job, right? Certainly, right, he's not all-knowing. He would have realized it wouldn't have worked to tempt Jesus, right? That he wasn't going to fall for the trap. He's overcoming what's going on there. I think it's Mark's gospel. It's one of them. We can find it later. After the note about Jesus' encounter with the devil, it says that he left him until an opportune time, which gets into the story and what we're going to talk about on Friday of this week, where he thought that killing Jesus was the final say. But of course, the subversion of that is that actually that is how Jesus fully overcame the powers of evil. Again, and Paul tells us later in scriptures, if he would have realized that that's how glory would have been brought to us, he certainly wouldn't have put him to death. The powers and principalities wouldn't have done that. So, not omniscient. He's not omnipresent. Again, our main text here is from Job. Satan can only be in one place at one time. We hear him say, "Where have you been?" "Oh, walking to and fro." Even the fact that he has to, he can be asked, "Where have you been?" Right? It's not like you're going to ask God, "Well, where have you been?" Everywhere, all the time. Satan is not like that. He is not omnipresent. His scope and power and knowledge is all limited, and God's is not. So when we kind of imagine, if we imagine like the forces of light and God versus the forces of evil, if we imagine that as a chess match, right? We have one player who knows all the moves, who is more powerful, with way more experience than the other player. Doesn't matter how many times Satan tries to win that match. God is so much better of a chess player and knows so much more and can even break the rules if he wants and will always win. I kind of like that analogy. I don't know. Why don't you write that down? It's like a chess match. It would be like me playing against, what's his name? Magnus something. super good chess player. I got no shot. No shot. No shot. It's just Magnus. He's that good. He only has one name. You have to be really, really popular to only go by one name. So I got no chance. I know how to move pieces in chess, and that's about as far as it goes. And I do know what check and checkmate means, but again, that's I got no shot. It's a little bit like that, but even greater, right? And the good stuff, Satan's end. So, Satan was conquered by Christ on the cross. Turn to Colossians 2:15. All right. So again, and this is a little bit of this is how Paul sees the world differently than us. And the way he describes what's going on here hints at that. Hints that his understanding is a little bit different in Colossians 2:15. So, this is talking about Christ. And having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. So this is the kind of big subversion moment in the Jesus narrative, right? We thought by killing the guy, by getting rid of the main character, right, that he would win. Because previously in the story of the Bible, you kill the person, right, and you kind of win. And that's generally a way we think of most of our superhero and movies, right? You kill the bad guy, you win, right? In this case, kill the good guy. So the devil thought, if I kill him, I get rid of him, it's over, right? But it turns out that was actually their greatest defeat. Is that because Jesus died, he actually sees victory over the things that have the tightest grasp on us, and their grasp is most manifest in death. And what was originally its kind of finality, right? Because when death happens, there is no more. Although, through Christ, that is not true. That we get to enter into the new creation, we could enter into what's next with Jesus and with God because of what he's done on the cross. This point is really important for me that you know, so turn to Mark chapter 1, where we look at this even further. So again, we kind of live in this immanent frame. We don't really often understand or see the world in the same kind of way that the biblical authors do. They have a way of seeing the world and the interactions and conflicts that are going on as being very spiritually charged, is the way we might say it. And when we see that in Jesus' ministry, one of the primary things he does is he exorcises demons and he faces these spiritual powers head on. And he constantly shows his victory and power over them. In Mark's gospel, it's interesting to note that Jesus' first interaction with anybody who is contra him, who shows up as an opponent of him, is with the demonic. And this happens here in Mark 1:21 through 27. I'll have one of you read it. Who needs some participation points? It's more fun that way. Molly, I love you, and you've already had the chance. Kate, all right. Kate, I haven't called on you tonight. So Mark 1:21 through 27. It's a longer section, but you got it. And who are you for?
Oh, I'm Kate Hansen, and I go to Edina. And they went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. What do I read?
Through 27.
Okay. The people were amazed at his teaching because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. Just then a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," said Jesus sternly. "Come out of him." The spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching and with authority. He even gives orders to impure spirits and they obey him."
Awesome. So we see in this section that the power over impure spirits is abnormal, right? That people comment on it. They're like, whoa, like he's legit because he has power over this impure spirit. There's something different going on about him. Again, I also point out that in Mark's narrative, this is the first time we encounter any kind of opponent to Jesus. And it's interesting to note that it's demonic. There's some spiritual dimension to it. Also really cool to note is the story starts and there's one man, right? And we have this interaction between Jesus and the man. But listen to how the demon responds. He says, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Did you catch the distinction there? It's one man, yet he says us. So the impure spirit, the demon that's there, is recognizing early on that this is a Jesus versus the demonic in a plural sense, versus all that's going on there. It's not just this one person that's Jesus is targeting and who's going to win and have victory over, right? And the whole us kind of thing isn't there for us to hint at that and for us to notice. I remember when this was pointed out to me, I was like mind blown because this is crazy. Like the simple noticing of it's one person, yet he responds in the plural. Really fascinating. So Jesus versus Satan versus his demonic, we have seen the first taste of victory. Of victory. Wow. All right. Angels. We're going to take a 10-minute break. So 5:08, who had just turned as I was speaking. You got so lucky. 5:08. Be back here at 5:08, please. All right, everyone, let's find our seats.
Yes, thank you. You can stay standing with those, Caleb.
All right, as you guys are sitting down, if you are coming on Project Colorado, I need you to raise your hand and stick it up. Jane, can you turn around and help Caleb pass out those? Anyone who is going to Colorado. All right, until you get one of the orange sheets, keep your hand up, please. The orange paper you're getting, students, is to vote for our Project Colorado theme verse. You don't have to write your name on it, unless you really want to. The instructions are on it, but you vote for your top two. You get 2 votes, so the verses, they're all right there. So this is the verse that Julie suggested some of these. Jane suggested some of these. Usually the reference or something ends up on the t-shirt, ends up in your binder. There's a teaching that's going to be taught about it. We pray it over you all.
You should, Tyler. You should.
That was extra credit. I don't write the fine.
No, I say you should, though.
Have to. So again, if you're going on Colorado, you're using that orange sheet. Leaders don't get a vote. Sorry, so. Yes. I don't know how you didn't get one. You should have your mom email Stephanie. No, you can have your mom email Stephanie, and I'm sure Stephanie will probably get back to you by the end of the day tomorrow because she's real quick. She's real good. Okay. Once you finish that, pass that into the leader closest to you, and then you can bring those all to Anita, who will collect them, because she's great at collecting things. Yes. It's certainly a spiritual gift, Anita, because when you collect things, they stay organized. When I collect things, it doesn't always happen. All right. We finished up with the orange sheet. Looks like we're ready to go. That'd be great if you could do that. Yeah, why not? Since you're hanging out there, right? Jane wants to get the votes in for her verse. She's going to try to rig it. Right? I didn't vote a verse, so I'm not going with y'all. So, no. Stay back.
Oh, wow. Okay, Tyler. Wow. All right. We're going to modify that grade book. I would not do that. I would not do that.
All right. Let's keep rocking and rolling. What angels are? Created beings. once you finish writing that, open to Colossians 1:16. Because Paul is all about the principalities and powers and wants to tell us all about them in Colossians, as well as Ephesians, actually. There we go. Colossians 1:16. As always, make sure as we're going through these, you are, underlining, highlighting, bracketing, writing in the margins and things, so that you have these for later and you know when you need to turn to them. So that's kind of the goal here with these. So 1:16. How about this? We have a leader who read it for us, just to mix it up a little bit. Nathan Wong, why don't you take that microphone from Greg Johnson?
I won't turn it on.
Well, it's already on. Too late. It is loud. I'm loud. Okay. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him.
Okay, awesome. So the him there is talking about Jesus Christ, and it's all things were created through him and for him, right? So Jesus is involved in creation, which means he's involved in the creation of spiritual beings as well. We also see, and we'll see this later in that section, that these things have all been placed underneath Jesus in his now exalted, resurrected status. So angels are created beings, right? So that means that they are not like God, where they don't have a beginning and an end. They have a beginning, but as we'll see, no end. No end. So angels are spirit beings. For us, I think it's interesting to note that spirit often maybe kind of gives us the idea of not real even sometimes, or a different type of, let's say, how do I phrase this? A different type of non-existence, or kind of out there. We think of spiritual things as being more subjective sometimes. The Bible does not think of spiritual things as being in that way. Spiritual things are just as real. They're just often not perceptible, or we can't really see them in the same way that I can see Lydia, who's right in front of me, right? It's a different type of way of existing or way of being that is still real that we need to note. Just a difference. So they can take bodily form. We see this happen in the biblical narrative, right? And they sometimes become visible. We think of, angels appearing at gravesides, right? Or previous gravesides. And obviously their appearances in dreams and visions, whether we think that's a vision where it's existing in the mind, or they're actually appearing. And that's what the vision is describing. So they're spirit beings. Angels, you've probably guessed, or you are familiar with, are God's warriors or soldiers. So opposite of kind of this demonic or evil activity, they're the good guys. Let's go Psalm 78. Was a long psalm. (49). All right. Who has not gotten a participation point yet tonight? You have, Tyler. Yes, you have. Yeah, Eliana.
I'm Eliana Hink. I go to Minnetonka High School. He unleashed against them his hot anger, his wrath, ignited Halsey, a band of destroying angels.
There you go. A band of destroying angels. So they are doing God's bidding. We're going to read more into this later of what it means for them to be fighting in a spiritual battle, a battle that is existing beyond our perception or understanding. Angels also have no end, right? So like we talked about, God does not have a beginning or an end. Angels do have a beginning, but no end. Wow, I keep saying and like that. End. No end. So they no longer die, for they are like the angels. That is speaking of us in the age to come. That's also the verse where Jesus talks about how there will be no marriage in heaven. So there you go. That little nugget for you. In some of these, there's going to be some crossover between angels and demons. And number 5 is one of those where that is true. So the intelligence and power of angels are greater than humans. Though they are limited and finite, they excel in strength and are referred to as greater in power and might than humans. This will later, as we'll see, explain some of the reason why they're employed in specific situations in the Bible to do miraculous things, like, rolling the stone away, right? Because it was a big stone. Peter had no chance, right? He got outran to the tomb, right? So what was he going to do with the stone, right? So doing that kind of thing, or in other times, striking down entire armies at once. We see that happening in the Bible, right? Their understanding and intelligence is greater than ours. And this is also true of the demonic forces, which is why we kind of understand there's this big versus between the two of them, right? And why often we need a little extra assistance in the fight against darkness, because angels, more intelligent, more powerful than us, and so are the demonic forces, which is why we need a little bit of help, or a lot of help. Cool. They are personal beings. So personal beings means that, kind of like you and I have names and have attributes about us and things that are maybe a little different about us, so do angels, right? They're unique. It's not just like a cookie cutter thing, like the little angel cookie cutout thing that you do for Christmas. If you're a big cookie family, my dad's side, we do all those little angel ones, right? So angels are not like that. They maybe for some reason they look the same, but they are personal beings and they have an intelligence and a will. And we're thinking about what's going on with some of the demons leaving, right? They had the personal choice to do that, just like other angels had the choice to stay. Let's go Revelation 12:12 for this. We haven't been in Revelation yet today. Also, that shouldn't say Revelations. It should take out the S, Chad. Cool. All right, so therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short. So again, we're seeing that the devil is understanding things. He is personally running, so that his personal time is short, just like any of his kind of band of enemies, band of our enemies, his other demonic forces. And then the heavens are rejoicing. So that is including angels who are rejoicing over the victory of God that is taking place, right, in the midst of that. Okay, what angels do. I would love for you guys to get a little spot check going right now, and at your tables discuss what is something that you've learned today that has maybe changed your understanding or enriched your understanding from what we talked about at the beginning of the time? Love for you guys to get a chance to kind of discuss that. And you in the back table get the extra joy of describing to Heather all that you have learned. So there you go. Made it back. Good job. All right. So what has been added to or changed in your perception today, or maybe what might be helpful as you encounter other people and their different opinions? Just kind of some wondering questions for y'all to discuss. Go ahead.
Could you tell us which verse 1? I know later, but thank you.
Okay, so to describe to you all, the reason we do that is when it comes to learning and absorbing more information, it is always better if you can describe in your own words what you are learning or describe to somebody else what you are learning. So that's kind of the goal of that exercise, is to give you guys a chance to do a little spot check, because it's a long session, lots of new content and verses and turning around. So the idea behind that little pit stop for us is to give you the chance to, maybe knowledge vomit a little bit and prove that you're knowing it before we walk away and get distracted by, the Masters or something else that might be going on in the world right now. So what angels do. Also, fun fact, my grandpa played in the Masters. So there you go. Yep. Yeah, he did. He told me he did not play well, but we're like, Grandpa, you played there, so whatever. All right, what angels do. So, you probably guessed this one, but their primary role is doing God's will, right? If any of the demonic forces are pushing against God, and we said about them, their primary role is to, try to stop his will or to make life for us more miserable so that we're not experiencing the good life that Jesus has for us. The primary role of angels is the opposite, it is the doing of God's will. So angels also punish the enemies of God. Ooh, Acts. Love Acts. This is a fun one. Acts chapter 12. We're definitely turning there. If you haven't read Acts yet, you're a follower of Jesus, you are missing out, let me tell you, all right? Lots of fun stuff going on in there. Sweet. 12:23. All right. Who has not been called on yet tonight for some participation points? Yes, I see you, Allie. You raised your hand a couple times. Yeah, she was. She was ready.
I'm Allie Plekenpool, and I go to Minnetonka High School. And, oh, wait.
Acts 12:23.
Okay. Immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died.
All right, there we go.
Is that the verse from Colorado?
Summer camp verse. We should have put that on the AUG voting for our verses. Seriously, what were we doing? Jane, Julie, y'all missed out. Missed opportunity. Seriously. So, again, kind of some weird and wacky things that happen that we don't necessarily have categories for. But we see in this that Herod got all big in his head. He thought he was that great. And because he didn't give glory and praise to God, boom, he fell over. And I don't know if it's like he like fell over and like instantly like worms just like, like ate him up. Or if it was like just telling that like he fell over and died and like, we want to know that like it was bad for him because his body was being eaten by worms. I don't know necessarily. But either way, it's just like, I don't know, like that's like Full Metal, what's going on there. So craziness. So we see that angels punishing the enemies of God. 3, much more comforting, some of the ways that they help us, a whole bunch of scriptures. So a comforting truth is the relationship of angels to individual believers. So angels protected Daniel, provided for Elijah, released Peter from prison twice. That's also the book of Acts. And guided Philip to the Ethiopian, again, Acts. And cheered Paul on during his shipwreck crisis, guess which book. And strengthened Jesus during his agony in the garden, Acts Volume 1, Luke's Gospel. An angel even helped an unbeliever, as when Cornelius and Peter were brought together. You can guess which book that was in as well. So there you go. So we see these kind of key moments in ministry and different things that are going on where there is, again, this battle that is happening between the forces of good and evil. And we have angels stepping in to give a special assist when it's needed, right? We find out in a couple of these situations, like for Daniel, he was thrown in a den of hungry lions, and normally what would have happened is they would have eaten him, right? So without some angelic intervention there, would not have ended well for him. He would have been eaten. Right? Elijah is given food after Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you by the end of the day. Peter is released from prison twice. On one of those instances, we know that they were going to kill him later. Paul was shipwrecked. You got to need some encouragement if you're like holding onto a board in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. I don't know. This does not sound like a fun time. And of course, strengthening Jesus before his crucifixion. So those are some of the kind of the important and cool assist moments that we have from angels. The last and kind of coolest maybe assist that we can talk about for now is that angels will accompany Christ when he comes in glory and judgment. So you think of that band of destroying angels we talked about earlier. We're talking about Easter, right? Because it's Holy Week starting tomorrow. And we kind of build up to Jesus' resurrection as king. And as Christians, we look for Easter now not only to remember his suffering and resurrection, but looking forward as well to his second coming, when he's going to come back and we're going to set the world to right. Our next session is the Doctrine of End Times, where we talk about this even more. But angels are going to be with him, and we're going to see these hosts of heaven coming with to bring in the new age and to do away with evil, because again, that's one of the angels' main functions. The questions I know many of you have been curious about is how many angels are there? And it would be like really convenient, I'll be honest, if like the Bible was like 10 million, And then we could kind of know, and then, I think a lot of us would be like in our heads, be like putting them on a map and being like, there's probably one here, and there's probably here, and in New York City, 15 or whatever. We just don't get a direct number, right? We're just told that there's a lot. So 10,000 times 10,000 in Daniel 7. And that kind of number, when it's being used in the Bible, is kind of shorthand for a lot, Because obviously 10,000 times 10,000, what does that equal? Is that 10 million? What is it? Where are your 100 million? Is that what you said, Caleb? 100 million. So that would equal 100 million, right? But that doesn't mean that we should think in our head, 100 million. It's like when Jesus says, forgive 7 times 7 times. He doesn't literally mean, 49. Okay, I guess that's how many we get. So you're sitting there like a tally for how many times your sister does you wrong. You're like, 47 times. She's got twice more. I don't know, man. That's not the point of that number. It's just said there's a lot, right? And we don't really know how many there are in specific. There are just a ton of them. All right, other angelic beings. We have a couple angels or angelic figures who are named in the Bible and given personal names, which is cool. Satan is one of them. We already talked about him, but he's on the wrong side. So, Michael the archangel. So he's actually the only archangel mentioned in Scripture, and he's considered the special guardian of Israel, contended with the devil for the body of Moses. Again, a wild thing. And spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai and led the battle in heaven against Satan. All very important things. Let's turn to Daniel chapter 10. All right. Again, who needs some of those participation points? Who has not spoken yet tonight? I'm trying to be democratic about our distribution. Elizabeth, thank you. You're going to read, Elizabeth, special mission, 10 through 14. Daniel 10, 10 through 14.
I'm Elizabeth Fong, and I go to Minnetonka High School. A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up. For I have now been sent to you. And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling. Then he continued, do not be afraid, Daniel, since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of my chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come.
Awesome. And then if you look down, I'll read it for us, but verse 21. It says, but first I will tell you what is written in the book of truth. No one supports me against them except Michael, your prince. So we see here this person is named Michael. And again, we see an inside, kind of like a peering behind the curtain, is what a book like Daniel or Revelation is doing. It's like a peer behind the curtain of our perceivable reality, of what we can see in our little immanent frame, right? And it's going behind that and seeing there's other things going on. Notice here what he says. It's like, hey, you started praying 21 days ago. And actually, I was sent the second that you started praying and you set your mind to humble yourself before God. But we find out that there was something else going on that prevented him from coming, right? He says, I got in a battle with the prince of Persia. Clearly, whatever this force is, prince of Persia, whether it's Satan himself or some other kind of evil angelic being, did not want him to go to Daniel. And so for 21 days, he was fighting. Which, 21 days. That's a long time, man. That's 3 weeks. Right, for a wrestling or like a sword fight, I don't know. Like, how are you gonna... like a gym session lasts like an hour and a half, right? That's a really long time. So, and we see the special battles going on, and he wasn't making any ground. And it actually took Michael coming in, stepping in the battle before he was able to be released and actually able to come and provide the aid that was needed, right? So we see Michael is really well known for this, for these kind of different confrontations with forces of evil and that fighting. We're going to talk a little bit more about in a second this Prince of Persia kind of character and what might be going on there. The second named angelic being is Gabriel the messenger. And it's the only other good angel named in the Bible. Obviously, he's known for announcing to Mary the birth of Jesus and to Elizabeth the birth of John the Baptist. So, I guess he's the baby guy, right? He's the baby guy. He's a little baby angel. So, pretty cool role is that he also appears in Daniel. So there you go at the bottom. But the joy and opportunity of bringing the news to these people would have been awesome. And actually in Luke, he tells us that he gets to stand with God and he gets to bring these special messages to people. So we see that angels are probably performing different tasks and they have different specialties, just like many of us, as you get older, will specialize in different fields of work and study and different things, and you will work to kind of master that idea, master that craft or that idea, whatever it is. Angels seem to have kind of a similar function where they master a certain thing or they're appointed over something special. And I think it's pretty cool that he's one of the only two named people, so that's pretty sweet. And then we have cherubim and seraphim. So these are the only winged beasts mentioned in Scripture. Now, a lot of us, no one said this earlier when I did my little spot check, but I mean, how many of us, let's be honest, when we think of an angel, the first thing that comes to our mind is like a long white flowing robe, a little halo, and like feather wings, white feather wings. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for owning that. On a cloud, right? Probably a harp, right? Something like that. The truth is, we're not told what angels look like, and we're actually, except for these characters, never told that they have wings. So, is it like the minority of them that have wings, or is it like the majority? I don't know. Or maybe they just have the ability to float because they're spiritual beings and they can do that. I don't really know. There's just kind of a lot that we begin to not know. But they're stationed at the Garden of Eden, and seraphim are mentioned in Isaiah's vision, which we should turn to. Isaiah chapter 6. Just because this is going to give us a description of an angelic being in a little more detail. All right. Who wants to read Isaiah 6, 1 through 4? All right, Kian. Thank you, sir.
I'm Kian. I go to Minnetonka High School, and Isaiah 6 through 4, 1 through 4.
6, 1 through 4, yep.
It says, in the year that King Uzziah.
It's Uzziah, but point of, for all of you, just commit and say it with confidence and no one will question you.
Okay. I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were two seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they were covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with the 2 they were flying, and they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sounds of their voices and doorposts and thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke.
All right, so we talked about their power and their ability, and we see a little bit of that there. Just by proclaiming praises to God, this temple is shaking, there's smoke going around, right? We have all this that's happening just by the praises that they're echoing. It's also interesting that we can see that they're covering their faces in the presence of God and their feet, and they're flying, and they're circling and doing this over and over and over again. You get a similar kind of vision in Revelation with John when he sees the throne room, and you see angels moving around the throne there, proclaiming praises to God as well. So these are the only winged creatures, and the Bible Project will point out that, because I don't know Hebrew well enough, seraphim actually sounds like the word for snake. So one way we can think of vision is they might be like a snake-like creature, which is interesting to imagine a snake with wings but also has feet. Regardless, there's a lot we don't know. All right, let's turn to Deuteronomy 32. Actually, how about this? Ladies, turn to Deuteronomy 32, and gentlemen, why don't you guys turn to, give me a second. Oh, Matthew chapter 6. I'll tell you the references in a second. 32:8. All right, ladies, we'll start with you. Who wants to read? Have you gone tonight? Oh, Lilia hasn't gone yet. 32:8 is what you're going to read.
Hi, I'm Lilia. I go to Eden Prairie High School. When the Most High gave nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, he set up boundaries for the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel.
Okay, awesome. So, what seems like a really strange and obscure reference, like what does this mean? When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided up mankind and set up boundaries for the people according to the number of the sons of Israel. So Michael Heiser is one of those people I mentioned earlier, and this is the verse that he points to where we see this idea of nations kind of being given over to different kinds of angelic beings or forces, and them having the chance to rule over and be in charge of different nations and kind of empower them in some sort of spiritual way. And we see this happening here, and this is where we understand from here on out where there's this kind of this conflict that's going to emerge between other nations, that the subtexts are powered by these different kinds of forces, and the people of God, Israel. Gentlemen, if you are in Matthew chapter 6, and you turn to '24, 6:24. Also takes a little bit of digging. Who wants, gentlemen? Brooks, all right. Haven't called on you yet tonight.
I'm Brooks Robinson. I go to Eden Prairie High School, and I'm in 9th grade. Verse 24 is, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money."
Cannot serve both God and money. Greg, do you know what the alternative translation for money is there? What's the word? Mammon. That's right. So mammon is the word that's used there. And this word can be pointed out as actually the proper name for the Assyrian god of wealth. And so I tend to agree with the line of thinking that points out that part of what Jesus is saying here is you can't serve the true God and this lesser God. Is that they're mutually exclusive realities. You can't serve one while trying to serve the other. And let's think about, first, because money is a more tangible thing for a lot of us than this idea of the division of nations. Let's think about how money can take a hold of people and the evil that it can bring in how people act and treat one another. It doesn't take much imagination or understanding to think that there could be some sort of evil spiritual force that can co-opt this thing, that can bring it into a way that pulls you away from God. We talked about some of the distractions that teenagers might have. The enemy is really crafty and he can use these things to pull us away. And the god of mammon is one that in our culture today is really kind of a big deal and is everywhere. Just like we could think of, is there a spiritual force that inhabits or is bolstering up the sexual sin in our culture? Another big one. Again, it doesn't take much imagination to think of these kinds of things or the way that violence is used. It doesn't take much for us to make a jump between there's evil things happening, and it also seems like there's an evil force that is empowering this kind of activity to take place in the world. And this is an example from Jesus and earlier where we see that we like to look out there and we see that, there's money and there's lots of things going on, right? And there's nations and they're having wars, but there's also, the Bible wants us to note, something else going on behind the scenes. The Prince of Persia is this kind of a similar idea to the division of the nations, where you have different entities that can empower places and peoples for evil to defy God. Our last verse that we're going to look at today is Ephesians 6. Was 6:10 one of the verses you could vote for, right? We're going to look at 6:12. That was 12. I'll read 6:10 through 12. So this is again Paul. We looked at Colossians a lot tonight, was pointing out, and here is Ephesians. So Ephesians 6:10 through 12. So finally, be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand firm then. And he goes on to talk about the armor of God. But again, we see in this verse that Paul takes for granted the idea that there are forces out there that are empowering evil. And actually, as believers, we have to recognize that our primary battle and struggle is against these evil forces that propagate or lift up anything that is against God, or that is against human life, or that is against the world and his creation. That out there's a battle going on. And our job is to stand firm and put on the armor of God so that we can fight against it. We can do this through scripture, through prayer. We found out earlier from Daniel, his prayers, right? And the response that he got there is one of the primary ways we can fight against spiritual forces. And we can push back against what our real battle is against. Because I think a lot of us, the temptation is to be mad at somebody and think that, this person is my enemy, right? And this person, I'm mad at that person, or maybe this group of people, but in reality, there's something else going on there. There are evil forces at play, and good forces, that are fighting and are trying to win souls and shape the trajectory of our world. That is the importance of our doctrine of angels and demons. Because God works in mysterious ways. And the battle that is happening and is taking place feels like sometimes that, God's forces are losing, right? Sometimes we feel like that when things are going wrong and we look on the news or whatever it is. But angelic activity still occurs today, and so does demonic. And God works in mysterious ways through all of this. And thank the Lord, we know how the story ends, and that not only has Christ's first stamp of victory happened in the resurrection, but we look forward to his second coming as well. So now, has a show of hands real quick, who's heard of the idea of guardian angels before? Okay, a fair number. Sweet. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a little table discussion where you're going to discuss whether or not you think guardian angels are a thing. So this idea that everyone has their own personal angel that's protecting them, and you have to use scriptural support. So you have to look back through your notes, remember some of the references I brought up for you, and defend your answer of whether you not think there are guardian angels, yes or no, and use scriptural support. discuss that at your tables.
I do know that God cares very deeply for each of us personally, and I'm going to suggest that.
All right. Thank you for engaging with that. Seeing how much Bible knowledge you were able to accumulate during the night, and obviously the chance to talk about it. I have very, very exciting with us right here. The results of the Project Colorado verse vote. I know. Anita is good like that. Anita is good like that. It was very, very close. So, yeah, within 3 votes, which feels close. So, in order to not make some of you angry, we'll just say what number 1 is. So, yes, Brooks. Too late. It's been ratified. It's stricken in pen right in front of me. Sorry, Brooks. So, it's right here. All right. Your verse for Colorado, 2 Corinthians 5:7. For we live by faith, not by sight. There you go. So, hey, you should all turn in your Bibles to 2 Corinthians 5:7. Take that out, and you should underline it and get yourselves ready for that. So, and some of you asked earlier if you should memorize this, and I think that the answer is obviously because it is 8 words. So I think you can manage. I think you can manage it. 2 Corinthians 5:7. For we live by faith, not by sight. There you go. So, and you know, some of you asked earlier if you should memorize this, and I think the answer is obviously because it is 8 words. So I think you can manage. I think you can manage it. So 2 Corinthians 5:7. For we live by faith, not by sight. not by sight. So, there you go. All right, Heather, do you have any final notes for us? Oh, Caleb. Here comes Heather. There we go.
Hi, everyone. Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, my little lamb chops. I will tell you, for those who like to know, on the final, I am going to ask you whether or not you think each believer has a guardian angel. And you are going to need to support your answer one way or the other. You don't have